Alrighty, we're back. Your favorite podcast show of the week. This is Location Weekly. It's episode number 512, and we're recording live on April the 13th. Brianna, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I am, it's like gearing up for packing and moving and, just trying to take it one day at a time, but I'm good. Family's healthy and work is good. So no complaints here. How
Yeah,
are you?
you had a good trip to New York. You're back home, and
I did. It was weird, like just seeing New York like that is very it's very odd when you're just so used to all the hustle and the movement. And there's still some of that during the day, obviously,
yeah,
but it's definitely a lot calmer and more empty than we've ever seen it in our lifetimes. So it was interesting, but it's New York. It'll come back, and it was a good trip. So we found some good places, and just wrapping that up. So yeah, I'm starting to get excited.
excellent. Yeah, no, things are good here. We're in lockdown here in the province of Ontario. Cases are rising a bit, so we're waiting for sort of that balance of the vaccines and the cases to sort of kind of get things under control. But hopeful, in the next few weeks that will be the case, and I'm hoping I can get mine. Hopefully in the next 3-4 weeks, that would be great. So it's the one time where you actually want to be older than you are because they started with the 80 plus group and then they're working backwards, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, but anyhow, otherwise things are good. The weather's been nice. We've been having a good spring so far, so can't complain too much. Yeah. So we've got a good show. Four stories that we want to cover. Some interesting things this week that are kind of outside of the normal location discussion, but very interesting nonetheless. I'll let you kick it off with a pretty cool story.
Yeah, so this is from probably one of my all-time favorite retailers, Trader Joe's, and they are working to make the world a more accessible place for people with cognitive and intellectual disabilities. Maybe not necessarily the world, but at least their stores. So they are partnering up with an app called Magnus Cards by Magnus Mode. And this new app launched this month, and with April being Autism Acceptance Month, they're the first grocer to be involved in this. So this is pretty interesting. So basically, what the app does is it offers these digitalized card decks, and they kind of guide consumers or users through different tasks and activities that might be difficult for or challenging or overwhelming, for people who have autism or other cognitive disabilities. So they're offering Trader Joe's has 5 card decks specifically for them, and they use these visual clues that help them, like, for example, how to check out your items or sensory experiences within the store and things like that. And they also have the option to have audio enhancement to kind of guide you through this. So pretty cool. And I love Trader Joe's, and I love that a grocery store is thinking about how do we make this experience better for kind of everybody, and the inclusivity that they have with this. So I think this is a great effort by them. I think that they're, a great grocery store anyways. I do probably 90% of my shopping at Trader Joe's. So I love this. But selfishly, I'm like, please, 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 though, please offer delivery. Please, please change your mind on that. But yeah, this is a great story. And I love this, that they're, thinking about the consumer experience from multiple perspectives, and not just what is the norm or status quo, or those of us who are healthy, completely healthy, and blessed to be that way. So yeah, I like the story. What do you think?
Yeah, I do too. Unfortunately, we don't have Trader Joe's here in Canada. I've been to a few Trader Joe's in my travels over the years. Great experience, great environment, and great products for sure that are kind of unique, right? That are hard to find, similar things everywhere else. So, but specifically to this story, I like that brands are finding ways to kind of not just sort of expand their offerings or their product inventory or things like that, but make their stores and make their locations accessible to as many customers as possible. I think delivery would go a long way, especially in COVID times, to your point. But I think if they're not, even if they're not going to do that, addressing those that are have challenges like autism, I think makes a ton of sense, and I think this is a great way to do that. I was reminded of a similar story as you were talking. In Starbucks launched a platform not too long ago. In fact, just I think in the last number of months, across all their stores for those with visually impaired, and so they've got an app called, I think it's called Aira. I think it's AIRA. Don't quote me on that. And basically, so if you're a visually impaired person and you have this app on your Starbucks, like as you walk into a Starbucks, you can connect with somebody, and then through the camera on your phone, like a live person can basically walk you through what you're seeing. So they can tell you about the items in the pantry, that are going on there, like the baked goods. They can tell you, help navigate you, using voice and visual, using the camera on your phone. So it's like having somebody with you, like a sighted person with you,
Mm-hmm.
through this app experience. And I thought, again, like similar to the Trader Joe's, the Magnus cards deployment here, I think brands are finding ways to activate their locations and make them, just more accessible. And I think that's a good thing. And I think it would be interesting, in the Starbucks example, I think that I found it interesting that it was a separate app that you had to install and not like something that they could bake into the Starbucks app proper,
Mm-hmm.
to sort of keep the experience all in one brand. And I guess similarly here with this experience, the Magnus Cards piece for Trader Joe's, I wonder about that sort of separation of the technology into two separate platforms to empower that. And I just wonder, it may just be that those other technology companies are focused on sort of updating the software and the environments and the sort of tools and things there, and maintaining that. And that's would be more difficult to do sort of baked into the corporate app, if you will. That being said, I think looking for ways to sort of deeply embed functionality, or through some sort of APIs or whatever could be done, I think. But
Yeah, I think it just depends. So, if there is an app that is kind of servicing that group of people, in the best way possible and offering them a lot within that one application, I think it does make sense to go that route versus embed that in your own app because, likely, for example, Starbucks, somebody who's visually impaired is not going to be using the Starbucks app, right?
yeah,
They might be using something else. So I think that on that note, it makes sense. But you just reminded me too, a story that we covered probably 2 years ago. It's been a while, but I think it was the giant grocery store. And we had talked about how in Pennsylvania, they had a robot that was kind of helping navigate and help you find things within the store. And we were, we passed through Pennsylvania on our way to New York, and that's where all my in-laws are. And so my kids were very excited that they got to see the robot in Giant.
nice.
But it's like all these things that more and more grocers specifically, but are rolling out and saying like, hey, how can we help the consumer experience? How can we help people find things? How can we help a variety of people, maybe those with disabilities? And I think it's great to expand our vision of what the consumer journey is going to look like. So
Yeah, love it. Alrighty, moving on to our second story now. So we'll head over to Australia, where Out of Home Media has launched a platform called the Audience Intelligence Hub. So this is an online data resource that basically pulls together information on more than 4,000 out-of-home screens across Australia. So these are roadside billboards, shopping center screens, offices, cafes, university campuses, etc., where these screens are. And they say that out of homes, retail and road networks reach very large audiences, averaging more than 450 million contacts weekly. And that's right now, like in the first part of 2021. So, so I think what I'm interested about in this story, and I kind of go all the way back to the early days of the LBMA, and when we were looking at this idea of, sort of people, places, and media, and all media, including out of home. And, we did a lot of work in those early days with, companies like Clear Channel and CBS Outdoor and so on. And I think the interesting thing for me, one of the challenges that I always saw, specifically in the out-of-home space, was you had a lot of players who owned real estate, who owned screens, inventory. But as a brand, you sort of had to say, okay, I'm going out and I want my ad on these particular screens, which happen to be, Clear Channel or whatever. And you do your deal, and that's it. And I think it's challenging to sort of look at a way from a sort of media buying point of view or a brand activation point of view to say, look, I want screens across multiple inventory providers in different environments. And I think for third parties that want to build app experiences or engagement experiences connected to the content on those screens or those billboards, there was no easy way to kind of really know, here's all the inventory that's out there, here's the current ads that are placed on there, and have some sort of real-time insight into that, right? And I think one of the opportunities I see coming out of a story like this is an ability to have that kind of visibility and transparency across multiple providers potentially, to kind of bring that insight to bear. Because I always look at it, look, if I wanted to build, let's say, a mobile app that created an ability to check into a billboard and create a connection between the content on the billboard and social media, let's say, or something like that, being able to do that where I knew through the mobile app platform what ads were on what screens and what billboards across all networks. All of a sudden I have like a much bigger, wider audience and experience I can play with. So that's what I'm excited about in this story, and that's a long way to say I think we need to see this kind of solution across every country right now. So
yeah, I agree. I think that really it's about reaching the right audience with your advertising, and so finding that right audience could span across lots of different providers, in a lot of different areas, in store, out of store, billboard, digital, whatever. So I think having that ability to sort of streamline that and contextually provide that relevance to advertisers is super important right now, especially as we're moving more away from that one-to-one model and more just kind of looking at contextual and audience, as a whole. So I think that it is good to see that there's, there's growth and there's like an open-mindedness to embrace that in this way.
Yeah.
Okay, so sort of similar, but a little bit different, and coming from a partnership that is bringing together two of my favorite places, Spain and Atlanta. So there is a new partnership between a company called Ladorian, which is based in Madrid. And they have this software solution that specializes in personalized, data-driven messaging in physical retail stores. So they are partnering with an Atlanta company called inReality, and they are a venue analytics software platform. So think of Ladorian is the company that's providing, the data intelligence and connected data points, and they have this smart communication channel. They look at factors like weather, demographics, and other events, and then they can combine that with inventory, sales, mobile ERPs, profiles, shopper patterns, and all those things, so they can serve up this ideal message for the viewer, that location, that in-store moment. Kind of going back to what everybody's been wanting to do, like the right message at the right time to the right people. And then inReality's technology is layering in a retail-centric venue analytics software that builds up data on consumer patterns and behavior in stores. So inReality is utilizing the camera vision to gauge traffic, dwell, impressions, engagement throughout specific areas or points of interest. And then they can look at age, gender, mood. And then they have this AI algorithm that's taking all of this, that correlates the data. They could use it for reporting. They can export it, predictive analytics as well, and enable this dynamic content. So obviously this collaboration makes a lot of sense with the two different things that they're bringing together. Ladorian has been primarily, focused on Spain. They are being used in 5,000 plus stores, but they're active in 6 countries now. And now they're working through a Miami-based subsidiary to go after this US market, right? So they're going to use this and they'll work across digital signage, interactive displays, electronic labels, even within the store's CRM. I think this is interesting. They related like the kind of cookie based and digital interactions that we have online. So they talked about how the click through is now eye contact. That's how they're relating it, and how the click for acquisition is like, hey, I want to pay. And I think this is an interesting concept. And like I said, I think this collaboration makes a lot of sense. There's 3 concerns that I have, 2 big ones, right? One is like, what's the longevity of the data that they're using and pulling in? How long can that be available at scale? And then the facial recognition thing is like, it's a little bit creepy. There is a facial recognition aspect to this. That to me is like, I don't know how much that's going to scale or how many consumers are going to be okay with that. And then the other one smaller detail that gave me a little bit of pause was they were talking about interacting with consumers with the right message at the point of sale. And for me, I feel like at the point of sale is too late, right? Like you've already done your shopping, you're checking out. That's like when you're wrapping things up. So that's kind of, delayed. I'm sure there's other opportunities throughout the store experience, that they're interacting as well. But the big ones, of course, are longevity of the data as well as the facial recognition. But overall, I think this is, it's not necessarily a new concept. We've talked about this a lot, but it's good to see these two, 2 companies in different parts of the world coming together to bring their software and their IP together and kind of make something unique and try to scale that around the globe. So.
Yeah, so I like this partnership. I think, without sort of reiterating everything you said, I think one of the things that's interesting about Ladorian for me, other than the sort of real-time personalized messages at the point of sale stuff, which, I think there is value in that, but I'll agree with your point that I think it may be, too late, or you need to at least complement it with something else earlier in the journey within the store. And I think inReality, the inReality part of that sort of addresses kind of what's going on throughout the store with the, the computer vision pieces and that type of thing. And, the inReality is a company that, we know well. Laura Davis Taylor, who's High Street Collective, been involved with Retail Loco and so on, is now the Chief Strategy Officer over there. So, shout out to her. Hope everything's well. I think 2 things I like about this. One is I think, it takes something that's, well deployed in Europe, 5,000 stores as you talked about. One of the really interesting things about Ladorian that I found in the story was it's not just technology. They also operate sort of almost an entire, creative ad agency component to what they do. They have a full content development team going on over there. So they're not just giving you technology. They're actually working with you to sort of optimize and build the content for you, which I think is super interesting because you don't often see that in a sort of all-in, tech company, right? And then I think when you sort of blend the data insights aspect of what can come out of, what inReality tracks, through, their technology and solutions and can trigger, real-time, content on screens and things like that, then I think it becomes, even more powerful in that sense, right? And what was that? What's that place? The name escapes me now. We went to for the retail tour in Atlanta, the market. Um,
Oh, Pond City
Pond
off of
City
French.
Market. That's it. Yeah. So like they were we were looking at the High Street Collective stuff there. And I think some of the ways that the technology was being deployed there, using screens and creating sort of personalized and real time experiences in that type of lab environment, I think is lends itself well to this type of mashup of technology, right? So yeah, I'm excited to see where this can go, and I especially like that it's already proven elsewhere, and now they're kind of bringing it into the U.S. market, hopefully into the Canadian market as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, there were aspects of it that kind of remind me of ground level and the indoor tracking and the hardware aspects that are part of this collaboration. And there is something to be said for the fact that this has been successful in Europe, which is one of the primary privacy concern places, right? So if it can work there, then it seems like it could be there's an opportunity to scale that.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Um, I completely agree with that. So we'll leave it at that, and let's move on to our final story. This one's really interesting for me. So we're talking about a company called Ulysses. And this is a company who claims that their goal in life is to provide location data from every car on the planet. And so they say, with the exception of cars in North Korea and Cuba, they have access to data being thrown off by ODBC drivers and other devices that are baked into modern day cars today, and can give us a lot of location data and a lot of other data related to what's going on with these vehicles. Um, they say that roughly 100 million new cars are manufactured worldwide each year. Increasingly, those cars are auto like connected to the manufacturer. Think about Tesla on the one extreme, and where we are with a lot of other sort of manufacturers right now. They claim they already have access to more than 15 billion vehicle locations around the world every month, and it estimates by 2025 100% of new cars will be connected and transmitting gigabytes of collectible data per hour. So first off, I think this is mind-boggling, like to think about one company being able to kind of collect and broker all of that data across every vehicle on the planet. We know the car companies are certainly trying to also monetize some of this on their own. But I think it's interesting that there's like a third party company out there that is able to kind of gather and amass this amount of data. I think the second thing for me is I think about the story in the context of the other discussions we've been having for a number of months about sort of the deprecation of the IDFA and all that's going away on app data and SDKs and all of that. And does this kind of data somewhat hedge against that a little bit? Like, yes, you don't necessarily have the phone and know that person walked into the store, but you might know that their car just parked outside the store or something like that. So it may give you some approximation of what's going on in terms of the movements of people based on the vehicles, if you can connect those things up together. So I think that's an interesting concept to think about for some of these other players out there that may be struggling in our industry. But I'm very, very intrigued with this company. I know the Senator Wyden and the Wall Street Journal and some of these guys that have been sort of writing pieces lately. I know I contributed to one a little while ago. About the U.S. government's use of this kind of data for sort of all sorts of different purposes, and whether they have the rights to buy this data and use that data without any seeking a warrant or getting consent, or things like that. So I think there's certainly a lot of issues. There's a lot of privacy. There's a lot of consent issues that need to be looked at, because I think most people are generally unaware. I'm going to just throw that out there that their car is throwing off data. We should be aware that our phone is throwing off data, and it's it's in our face that our data is being shared all the time, and we're getting these notifications and from the apps and so on, but we're not getting that from our car. And I think that's something that we need to think about. Are there going to be similar rules and requirements around that type of data as we go forward? But in the short term, I think there's a lot of opportunity here for the industry to tap into something like this as a way to sort of hedge against what's going on with the other data. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with most of everything you said. I think that you know, the for me, I feel like the reality of what consumers are really fearful of is government use of the data, not necessarily advertising use of the data, right? Like we're not fearful of, I don't know, Samsung wanting to sell me more electronics, right? Like we are more concerned with the government, overreaching and infringing on people's basic rights to privacy, or kind of having that minority report type of a government and a situation. So I think that does give me a lot of pause, and you want to I have a lot of questions as well, like what type of data are they getting? Is it identifiable at an individual level? How, like, are they getting vehicle registration information alongside of this data? Like what else is there that they're combining? Because it's not far-fetched to say that somebody couldn't get that as well, right? There is that type of data that's available, and lots of car manufacturers use that for their advertising to say, like, oh, I want to advertise to people who are due for a new car or who have bought this type of car before, or things like that. But when you combine that with the location data of the vehicles and all of potentially what is out there, it definitely gives you some concerns. I do think that there's a lot of opportunity as well from a marketing and advertising perspective, or just from a smart cities perspective, right? For planning, for transportation, for understanding the movement, and how cities are growing and expanding. So I think that there is opportunity, but it certainly makes you think, like, if money is the end all be all for these companies, they'll definitely be selling to the government, which most of the time it is. So it gives you some concern. And like you said, how is it possible that one company has access to all this data, right? So
yeah, it's a little crazy. So definitely something to pay attention to and dig into more. I certainly am going to go spend some time and kind of learn more about these guys and see see what else is going on, who else is using this, and kind of go from there. But definitely relevant to the world of the LBMA and location-based marketing and advertising and data. So an interesting story. So that's it. That's our show for this week. You've been listening to episode number 512 of Location Weekly. We thank you for your time. Reach out to us if you have feedback, story ideas, of course. Give us some love on social media or the whatever podcast platform you consume this on. And, we'll be back next week with another show. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Bye.